Welcome to another Airbrush Asylum video. In today's video, I'm going to talk about the main differences between a gravity feed airbrush and a siphon feed airbrush. Let's get into it right now. So I think that the first thing that you need to do when deciding between either a gravity or a siphon feed airbrush is to work out what you're actually going to be using the airbrush for. So if you want to use your airbrush to do automotive airbrushing, including both cars and motorbikes, you want to maybe work on miniatures, you want to do some cake decorating, illustrations, working on canvas, even maybe some remote control cars. So you need that fine detail work, but you're not reliant on needing a whole heap of paint, even though this HPCS has quite a large paint reservoir. Then you'll find that the gravity feed option may be best for you. Alternatively, if you're more of a t-shirt airbrush artist or you want to do large scale murals, then you may find that the siphon feed option is better for you due to the larger cup, meaning there's a whole heap more capacity to hold the paint. So talking a little bit more about the jars, you can also hook up different size jars. So this one here holds a lot more paint, and you can easily just hook that one up and cover a very, very large area. Let's say if you're doing a mural or you're painting some backdrops. Now to attach any of the jars to a siphon feed airbrush, you need to slide it in like so and then give it a twist. Okay, so that way it sort of locks it in. It doesn't have a thread, even though some brands do, but this particular one, which is the Sagola XTECH 500, doesn't have a thread, and you'll find most of the siphon feed airbrushes do not. The other thing is you can also get sealed jars like so, both in glass and plastic. This one shown here is just a plastic one. If you are going for plastic, then make sure that it is a good quality plastic that will hold urethane paints if that's what you're deciding to use. For water-based paints, something like this will be fine. Okay, so now that I've discussed a little bit about a few basic pros and cons about the gravity versus siphon, let's get into doing some spray tests and see how both perform, and I'll show you some of the limitations and benefits of each. Okay, so for the purpose of this demonstration, I'm going to add some black Trident water-based paint. Now I've already thinned this out. Just going to tip some in, put the lid back on, and we're ready to go. Now you'll notice that that lid just pops on the top and can be removed like so. It doesn't screw in, so you just press it down and that's in place. Another thing to make sure when you are using a gravity feed airbrush is that that hole is clear. It's very important. Last thing I like to do with all my airbrushes is just remove that air cap so that I've got a bit more control over my tip drying, and I can also create finer detail. So let's go ahead and try out the gravity feed. Okay, so going ahead and using the Eclipse from a distance, do some broad spray. Now if I go full throttle, you can see how much paint I'm putting on, and then you can compare that to the siphon feed airbrush and how that sprays later. So due to there being no cup in the way, I'm able to get up closer to the surface. I can virtually touch the surface, and then that way the gravity feed airbrush allows for nice fine detail. Okay, so now let's go ahead and fire up the Sagola XTECH 500. Now this one has a 0.5mm needle. Let's go ahead and put some paint in the jar. And if I'm not happy with that consistency, if the paint's too thick, then I can always add some reducer into that as well. The other thing you can do is if the paint is too thick, then by all means just turn the pressure up a little bit, and that will help to push out any thicker paint. The other thing to note is that this also has a breather hole, which you can just see there, so that has to be clear. And another thing that is important, which I'll show you with another jar, for example this one here, so you'll notice that the hose is cut on an angle. This is important because when that goes in, obviously it goes right down to the base so that it can suck up the most amount of paint. But if that wasn't cut on an angle, or if that hose is too long, sometimes it will block up and then obstruct the flow. Because keep in mind, this is a suction feed airbrush, so it needs to suck the paint from the bottle up through and into the airbrush. whereas the other one being a gravity feed, it's a natural flow of the paint. So keep that in mind. With some of the bottles, I used to always trim that hose so that that would avoid that blockage issue. And again, just like the iwata, I'm going to go ahead and remove that air cap to expose my needle. Okay, so now using the siphon feed from a distance, like I like to hold onto the jar and wrap the lead around my wrist like so, but you'll notice how much quicker this pumps on the paint. Now that's the same PSI, and you can see the coverage is a lot quicker and there's a lot more of a broad spray. Keep in mind that this brush has a 0.5mm needle nozzle setup. So you can see I'm getting a little bit of intermittent there. So keep in mind, if you're going to be painting a Harley tank or something that's more of a 3D object, then this may get in the way, especially if you're going to run with a larger bottle like so. I'm still able to get up reasonably close and just pull back a little bit. Now again, being the 0.5, it's not going to go as fine. Getting a bit of trailing there. You can see the coverage is a lot quicker and a lot heavier. So you'll notice that going a bit thicker, the line performs really nicely, whereas it trails off a little bit there. But you can see that shading and getting really quick coverage is a lot easier with this brush. So you'll find that t-shirt artists that use a siphon feed will have maybe 20 or 30 of these lined up already with the colour in it, and then at the end of the day they'll take the colour cup out. They'll either put a bit of masking tape over it, so you can also get the little red caps, little plastic caps that slip over the siphon feed tube and seal it off. And I usually also put a bit of masking tape to block the breather hole if you are going to leave it overnight. Okay, so what I want to do now is I've got a bit of airbrush cleaner in this airbrush. I'm just going to pull back full throttle and you can see the spray pattern there. Okay, now I'll show you the spray pattern with the siphon feed. So another thing to note with the siphon feed, which could be a bit of a drawback, is that because it is a suction feed airbrush, if you are working down, say on a flat surface, then it's going to start to be a bit more intermittent because it's going to have trouble sucking up the paint. So you need to be level with it when you're painting so that you've got a nice smooth flow. If you've got enough paint in there, yes, you can tip it back and forth a little bit, but working down or working upwards could be a problem if that little hose isn't sucking up any more of that paint. So you've got to keep that in mind. Whereas with the gravity feed, it's just naturally flowing and spraying out. So you could be going like so, you can be working down flat. So nice and versatile for that particular reason. So the other thing to note is when you're changing colors, so using the gravity feed, you would remove the cap, you tip the paint back into the color that you are using, providing that it's okay to do so, it's not contaminated or you haven't like totally over reduced it. I usually have a separate little empty bottle so that I keep pre-reduced colors in those bottles separately to my brand new bottles. So then once you've removed the color from the color cup, then you would clean that area with airbrush cleaner or water. And I also like to remove the handle, loosen the needle nut, and then pull the needle out, flush through this hole as well with airbrush cleaner or water, and then reassemble it. Now I tend to do that for every single color, depending on what color change I'm doing. So let's say, for instance, I'm going from a yellow to a red or even an orange, then I'm not too concerned about it. But if it's a change from, say, black and then going to white, then I would definitely give it that thorough clean. So just keep in mind and work out what color you're changing from. The main thing to remember is you are going to waste a lot more paint if you are just blasting it through and waiting for that new color to become present rather than just giving it a full clean. So with the siphon feed, you would do the same, or the other thing that you can do, you would have multiple jars. So meaning you'd have, you know, however many of these with all different colors lined up, and you might even have one like this with some either reducer, like automotive reducer in it, or airbrush cleaner like I've got here, and then you would blast through between colors, keeping in mind that paint can still crawl up into the back of that needle assembly. So I would also recommend pulling the needle out and flushing through there if you are changing from a really dark color to something lighter. And again, you know, like I said, going from say a black to a white, for instance, would definitely make me remove that needle. But you could get away with just flushing through in between other similar colors. So I think all in all, gravity versus siphon, it's really up to you and what sort of airbrushing you're going to be doing more of. So if you're going to be doing more large-scale murals where you need greater volumes of paint, and you might also be a t-shirt artist, then definitely I would recommend the siphon feed. A lot of siphon feeds also come in a 0.35, so you don't necessarily have to get the 0.5, totally up to you. But if you're doing more of the general airbrushing, then the gravity feed would be for you. Personally, even though I have both, I very, very rarely use the siphon feed because I don't do a great deal of larger work, as you know. So for me, the go-to is always the gravity feed. So I'd love to know which one you use and what sort of artwork you create using that particular brush. Leave that info in the comments below. So to continue your learning, be sure to check out some of the other videos and playlists that I've got listed here. And until next time, go grab your airbrush, whether it's siphon or gravity feed, and create some amazing artwork yourself, and I'll see you again very, very soon in the next video. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.